What's the dumbest thing you believed as a kid? The teachers sleep at school. The first time I saw one of my teachers at the supermarket, I was shocked. I must have thought the school kept them in a broom closet or something. That 6 was literally sleeping next to one another and making moaning sounds. I heard things I wanna forget. That actors/TV characters would have to come back into a studio for each rerun of a show/movie. I would always be so amazed that people would have the time to go into a room with a camera multiple times a day just so I could watch them do the same thing over and over again. I used to think that laugh tracks were somehow real life, like I was hearing everyone else laughing who was watching the same show I was. In hindsight, this is really stupid. Obviously the sound is coming from the speakers, but growing up we only had TV at my grandma's place and I remember laughing really loud when the laugh track came on so all her neighbors would think I got the joke too. I thought the black market was an actual market, like under a bridge or something. I believed this for longer as I want to admit. Blue fire was cold. That my grandma G had a glass eye and that she lost her eye in a bar fight. Nope, took me until I was 20 to discover she just had a lazy eye, and my dad and his brothers always told kids that story every holiday meetup. Not me, but my brother was convinced for a few weeks that some cows had longer legs on one side of their body so they could stand on hills. The dinosaurs were still alive on another island, and I kept asking my mother if we could go to the island with all the dinosaurs. Then she told me they were all dead. You know those animatronic dinosaurs at museums? I knew they were robots, but as a child I was convinced that the robot was unaware of its animatronic status. I believed that if the robot wanted to, it could and would step over the barrier and eat me and everyone else. This fear was compounded when my dad, more than once, picked me up and pretended he would drop me down the other side of the barrier. I had no idea that morning sickness was associated with pregnancy. My coach was concerned when I shrugged my shoulders and stated that's what was probably causing my sluggishness at football camp practice. My stepdad had an old truck with 2 gas tanks that he would flip a switch to change from one to the other. He had us convinced that he would magically steal gas from other vehicles. He would tell us to pick one, and we would watch the gas dial go from E to F while driving on the highway. Blew my mind. I used to watch my dad go to the ATM, look at the receipt, and get grumpy/frustrated. I knew how bank accounts and ATMs worked, but the kid logic part of my brain figured that they also kind of worked like slot machines. In that, when you conducted some transaction on them, you got that slip with 3 icons on it. If you got one with 3 cherries, for example, you would take it inside, and they would deposit $50 or whatever into your account. I figured he was frustrated because he kept losing all the time. I even asked him a few times when he was looking at the receipt, "Did you win?" And he was like, "No." I didn't know cars have a turn signal lever, so I thought the car knew where we were going. I thought the car would use the arrows to tell my parents where to turn. I thought a baby just randomly appeared in a woman's womb. I stayed awake crying about it because I didn't want to become pregnant. For some reason, I thought every car that was made had to do a crash test. Probably because my dad once told that our car had a very good rating in the crash test. I was amazed by the fact that old cars were repaired so well before being sold. I thought that drinking and driving meant any drink. My brother and I wrote letters to Santa, and our dad would open up the coal furnace door and we would throw them in the fire. We believed they would go directly to the North Pole. My mom told me babies came from pumpkin patches. I thought that if you eat a pumpkin you'll become pregnant. When I was about 4, my older sister told me that since the population of Japan was so high, Japanese people slept sideways on their beds so they could fit more people on every bed. I believed it until I went to a sleepover at 13 and suggested that we sleep Japanese style on the bed so everyone could fit. That all bald men were kidnappers. No idea where it came from. I really don't think I was kidnapped as a child. But if I was, it was definitely a bald man that did it. I thought men who were hairy all over were less evolved. My dad also made me believe there were little gnomes working in ATM and vending machines. I often got caught doing stupid stuff when I was a young rascal. When I would get home, my dad would say a little birdie told him he seen me do such and such with the boys. Up until I was 8 or 9 maybe, I believed my father had some sort of snitch pigeon keeping an eye on me. Edit. Punctuation amendments. That we had to change our names during different stages of our lives. Like we have a toddler's name, a teenager's name and an adult's name. 2 gems from my youth. 1. I used to think my testicles were the eggs of my future child alike. One day they would hatch, and I'd have 2 kids. 2. I thought safe sex meant someone left their clothes on. Once I was playing with some toys and my mom was talking on the phone to her friend. I guess they were talking about kids growing up and having families someday, because my mom puts her hand over the phone and asked me if I wanted kids someday and if I wanted boys or girls. I gave it some thought and said that I wanted 1 boy and 1 girl. For the longest time after this, I thought that it had been completely decided, like my mom was just on the phone with whoever you call to place an order for kids, and my order had been finalized. Not sure if this was just a UK thing, but as a child I had some of those gooey jelly alien toys that came in plastic eggs, and the big rumor on the playground at the time was if you put a boy alien and girl alien in the same egg and put it in the fridge, they would make a new baby alien overnight. I told my parents about it and told them I was doing it. While in bed, my parents added the extra baby alien overnight. So when I woke up and found the 3rd alien, I lost it, went into school and told everyone. 4 years I swore blind it was true and really happened. It was a very heartbreaking day when I realized what had happened. When I was a kid, my mom explained to me that we all had belly buttons because that's how our moms fed us before we were born. So I thought when you got pregnant, your belly button opened up and you just put whatever you wanted to down there. Like I thought women were just shoving chicken legs in their belly buttons. Plot twist, I'm a postpartum nurse now. That the gender of a baby depended on which person was trying harder during sex. People don't like people that grow vegetables in their house. I secretly celebrated my mum's poor in-house gardening skills because her tomato plants never had any tomatoes. I was about 11 when I figured out what those tomato plants were. When I was younger, my dad upgraded the speaker setup for the TV to include surround sound. The rear speakers were mounted to the ceiling and were large white boxes. On the front of the speakers it had the numbers 3508. I always thought that was kind of strange until many years later I realized they were both speakers mounted upside down. My brother had me convinced for a while that each person had to have a unique favorite color, and since his was blue, I had to change mine. On my first day of kindergarten, we had to introduce ourselves and say our favorite color. I was super stressed out because the kids in front of me picked the good colors, and I kinda panicked and told everyone my favorite color was gray. In my family we were kind of assigned colors by my parents. My little sister and I looked like identical twins, so my parents dressed us in different colors. My older sister was much taller than us and had already chosen blue as her color, so my parents went with a chipmunks theme. The oldest was blue like Simon. I was red for Alvin and my little sister was green for Theodore. Anytime a family member brought us back t-shirts or dresses from their travels we always got our color and it kind of stuck. We still all predominantly wear our colors. We're all in our late 30s and even our raincoats as adults are our colors. It's quite silly. I've only ever worn a red raincoat. When I buy a new one it's always a red one. When I was younger, our garage always had a very distinct smell. My parents told my siblings and I that the smell in our garage was the smell of burnt tires because my dad would work on cars and dirt bikes as a hobby. Being the middle child, we always tend to find out the family secrets, whether we want to or not. Fast forward to when I'm 15 years old. I standing in a parking lot with my mother and 2 girls I was in a quince with. As we were all waiting in this parking lot for our friend who was having the quince, I started to smell burnt tires. I said to my mom that it smelled like burnt tires. My mom and the 2 girls all started chuckling. I was confused as to what was funny and the 2 girls said to me that I was not smelling burnt tires. My mom eventually told me what that smell was, and she just tried to convince me my smelling was off. I still put 2 and 2 together that night. In short, I was 15 years old when I found out that my dad was a huge pothead and would just smoke pot all the time in our garage. Also, burnt tires and weed should not smell the same. The wind was a living entity. His name was Billy, and he had the face of what I think is, or is like the Scream mask. Now I wasn't exactly a kid, but I was under 18, so I hope it counts. So when I was about 18 I was watching TV with my parents and a drug ad comes up on the TV and then gets to the part where it tells you who shouldn't take the meds, i.e. pregnant, nursing and stuff like that. So after the ad I look at both my parents and say, well that sucks, you guys can't take those meds. My parents, both very confused, looked at me like, what? Why? Which I tell them, well it says you can't take it if you're nursing. Both my parents are nurses and I mistook nursing from the ad that it applies to nurses. My parents had a damn good laugh over that one edit. I know that was pretty dumb, but funny. I thought that my stomach was actually the entire volume of my body. Eating food would pile it all up, as if putting it into a bag. When I was asked why I would drink or eat smaller foods when I was full, my reasoning was there are still cracks between all the other food I ate, so it can fall through those gaps. When I was pretty young, probably about 5 years old, I met the Black Power Ranger and got a picture of him signed. In the picture you could see that he was missing his middle finger, and my mom told me it was because he had flipped his mom off, so she cut it off. I believed it until I was about 20 years old when my mom told me she had lied about it and didn't actually know what happened. Growing up, I told so many people this guy's mom cut his finger off. If you turn on the light in the car while driving, you'll get arrested. And that the no minors sign outside bars and taverns was there so they wouldn't get coal dust inside and flash the lights at everyone. That every time you learned something new, you got a new wrinkle in your brain. Oh boy, I've been waiting for a question like this. So I grew up near a nuclear power plant, which 4-year-old me thought was a cloud factory. My parents didn't take me to church, but I knew that people went to church to worship God, who created the world. I was also a huge fan of the Care Bears at that time, who lived in the clouds. What do those 3 random tidbits about myself have to do with this question? Well, 4-year-old me came to the conclusion that the Care Bears go to church and worship the nuclear power plant as the creator of their world. That was perfect logic to my tiny toddler brain. I was born in a rural foothill town, so shopping for anything substantial meant going to the city, which was really just a bigger foothill town, or if it was a big deal, then down into the valley. This would take hours, and it was always dark by the time we got back home. On the trips back, the bleak darkness would be broken by some large structure way out in the distance that had multiple rows of warm lights. Mom would say to my sister and I, "Look you guys, that's where the king of misfit toys lives." You know, the flying lion from the old Rudolph movie. My sister and I would press up against the window and marvel at it, and continuously ask Mom if we could go there. There was always some reason why we couldn't go this time, but maybe next time, so we would just stare at it until it got obscured by hills. We moved to the valley years later, and I'd forgot about the king's palace in the distance, but as an adult, I think someone finally told me it was a correctional facility. Gosh, Mom. Oh, this is something that just bit me in the ass last year. I grew up in a very small town. One of my friends was from a city. I was over at his place and his mom gave us a pomegranate. I've never seen or even heard of this before. Well, he told me not to eat the seeds because they were poison. Last year my wife bought a pomegranate for my son who was interested in trying new types of food. I said to my wife, just be sure he doesn't eat the seeds. She looked at me funny. I said they really should put a warning label on them because the seeds are poisonous. She broke down laughing. I googled. Hats off to you, Sandy. You got me good. It was 30+ years